Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 2. We are 2/3 down the page, 1197. Okay. We're discussing Riyah, how a person comes to an experience of the divine in a form of vision. Where there, that will cause the primary thirst. As he said, Chelasava, Ikir Inya Chelasava, by the Hariyah Belikus. As he explained, that when you see something, you have two extremes here. On one hand, you're seeing the very thing itself. So it creates a tremendous, I would even say lust. We're talking obviously in holiness, but a very strong longing. Because on one hand, you see it. On the other hand, Riyah does not satisfy. Just by seeing something, it does not satisfy us. It doesn't enter the pnimius of a person because they're just seeing it. Whereas when a person comprehends something, on one hand, the comprehension is never quite as intense as then when you see it, but there's a certain element of internalization. As we discussed from Tafresh Pei Beis, from the Friedrich Rebbe's explanation. Okay. So then we began, so how do you come to this Riyah? So the operative verse that he's using here is Su'u Mare Meinechem V'Ru'u Mi Bara Ela. Uru'u. Raise your eyes to heaven, Marim, and see who created all of this. So it's a level of Riyah. And he explained, what does this mean? That when a person contemplates on the koyach Ein Sof, the power of the divine to create, that nothing can create something yesh ma'ayin, not in this lower worlds and not in the higher worlds. Everything is ilah v'alu. One thing is reshaped into another. Yesh mi yesh, ilah v'alu. But even if all the people in the world would come together, they couldn't create one wing of an insect. So this is only possible, only possible by the Creator. And as he explained, this is both below and above. So that creates a wonder, a tremendous wonder when you see this yesh ma'ayin. That's where we stopped here. So we discussed a bit what this means to see, and different things were said here yesterday. I'll just give an example how I understand it. It's when you see, for example, a light bulb that's burning or another appliance that's functioning. So though you don't see the electricity per se, because electricity is not subject to the physical eye, but the activity and the fact that it's energized is a clear indicator. It's not just you heard about it or you contemplate that there must be an energy in here. For all practical purposes, you're seeing the vitality indicates on the force that's within there. So that's why you could call it Riyah, because you're seeing something that's alive. You're seeing a yesh that came to be, an existence. With our own eyes, we can see it. Su Mare Meinechem. And maybe that's why he says Lamaila, because it's also Lamaila. Okay, well, basically, we look at it, so that leads us to appreciate and see the koyach Ein Sof. But we're still in the middle of the subject, so let's continue now. Now I was going to qualify and said, 1 second, you just said in El Yenim, you also don't have yesh ma'ayin. So he says now, he qualifies like this. The line begins chulu. It's only the power of Ein Sof, of the divine Ein Sof, that has the power to create something that does not have any beginning. In other words, it's like literally a yesh that does not have anything that it evolved from, except the power of God to create it. It says, Umashebchinis Malchus, Humahave, and the fact that we've learned that Malchus has the power to create. We know that Malchus of Atzilus is the power of Esav, travels through Malchus that creates Biyah. So he right away immediately says that the fact that Malchus is Mahave It's not because Malchus on its own has a power to create Yesh Ma'ayin. It's because in truth, Malchus, in its root, it's truly higher than all the spheres. That he, Nesucha means like he, not dripped. I say he formed it. Meresha Mikedam, he, like Nisuch, what's the word in English? It's like when you form something, let's say from hot metal, you pour it and then it hardens into something. There's a word for it. Anyway, Meresha Mikedam, that means Meresha Mikedam in the beginning and before everything else. So
like Nisuch Ayin, Nisuch.
Right, like pouring. Like he poured from Meresha Mikedam. Yeah. Okay. So that's what Malchus is. So Malchus has something that it is drawing from the Koyach Ein Sof. The Chol HaTesviris, like he says in Eitz Chaim, that all the 9 spheres, in other words, besides Malchus, Hein Ma'arich, come from Arich. Arich is the lower level of Keser, and Malchus, the Sheresh HaMalchus Hu Merad Lo, Bereisha D'Lo Yisyada, the unknown head, that's not even known, it's beyond consciousness, that usually refers to Atik. So you see here, that's not like an Elyonim, there's the power of Yesh Ma'ayin. Malchus is a unique state that it carries the power of Koyach Ein Sof, and it's not like all the other spheres in that sense. Okay. Why is he qualifying? Why is it so important to qualify here? Because he wants to say that only the Koyach Ein Sof has the power to create, not any of the higher levels. Okay. The Yesh Koyach Ein Sof b'Malchus. And in Malchus, there's the Koyach Ein Sof Visrat Law, which carries the divine infinite power. That's why it's through Malchus that Malchus creates Ma'ayin Liyesh. So it's not Malchus has this power. Malchus is carrying the power of Ein Sof traveling through it. This in Ageres HaKedesh, number 20, Siman Chof, he discusses, the Alter Rebbe discusses Malchus is like Eretz, like earth. Earth is the only creation that has the power, Teitzi Eretz Desha, to make something grow, which she says is Al Derech Koyach Ein Sof. And he explains there because Malchus has that ability. In other words, God is using Malchus as his instrument of the Koyach Ein Sof, travels through Malchus to create. Okay.
Is that law, Atik?
I just said, yeah. In this context, for sure. Yeah. So now he's going to go back to the theme that we're addressing. Vahare. So what do we derive from all this? Vahare kasher anuroyin mitzias yesh. So when we observe and see and gaze at the mitzias of a yesh, we look at an existing entity, mitzias yesh. Hari anuroyin b'zeh koyach ein sof. We see in it the power of Ein Sof, which is creating it. Hamahaves yesh, which brings this yesh into being. In other words, we know that this entity could not have created itself, and it's not shaped from something that came before it. So the Koyach Ein Sof is obvious to our eyes when we see the yesh. We see the Koyach Ein Sof with it, the creative force that's bringing it into being. That's what he says here. And why is it called Riyah? Because this is not based on someone telling you this. It's not based just on contemplation. It's based on observation. So now he says, I'm sorry, no. And when a person then contemplates well, the Ayin Isavis Yesh Ma'ayin, in this matter, in this idea that everything in this existence is being brought into existence by the Koyach Ein Sof, Tichla nafshe me'oid. His soul, from the word kiloyin, back to kiloyin, his soul expires in a form of Ela Ein Sof Baruch Hu, to Ein Sof within this, because when you recognize it well, like he says, Mizbein and Hativ, not just in passing, not just superficially. So then you realize what reality is. So your nefesh is yearning, is longing, tichla nafshe el me'oid el ein sei baruch hu, to the ein sei baruch hu that's bringing it into being. Of course, that's due to the fact because you appreciate that your existence is not a self-contained existence. There's a force that's within it, and you want to connect to that force. Now, you can ask a klotz kasha. Who says you want to connect to the force? You know that God created existence. Fine, yesh mayim. Why is it necessarily evoking an element of yearning and longing? So, but Pasha's the answer to that is, because the whole purpose of this is avodas ha'adam, the service of a human being, to connect. You don't want to connect to God's product. You want to connect to the force that's creating the product. So in other words, it's all predicated on the principle that we're seeking to connect. That seems like the obvious reason. And when a person realizes that the truth of reality, like anonesiv malka, we have the expression where a person says, I'm not interested in the messengers of God. I want to have the thing itself. Like sometimes you'll come to someone, they'll say, okay, I want an appointment with the king. And the king says, see my secretary. I don't want the secretary, I want you. Because I know you're the force behind it all. So the connection that we desire is with the source of it all. Okay. So that's yesh ma'ayin. Now he's going to discuss another riyah, another visualization that we can experience in longing for and aching chelasava for godliness. What he's going to discuss now is not creation, but the perpetuation of creation. The fact that everything in existence continues on with the same intensity. So he says, "V'chein behasmodas kiyum hanivroim u'bepulosam atmidis." So now we're not talking about the actual creation, yesh ma'ayin, but in the hasmodas kiyum hanivroim, which means the continuation, the perpetuation. U'bepulosam atmidis, and in their functionality, they're in unwavering functionality, their constant functionality. In other words, the sun rises every morning and the moon in the evening, and the seasons was mentioned, spring, summer, fall, winter. Everything in existence is not just created by a creator, but it also has this incessant, this relentless, continuous power that it continues on. So he says, this, need of a nigla b'zekei cheinsaf. In this too, nida is obvious, v'nigla is revealed, the keich einsaf. Because why? Anything in existence, for example, if I throw a stone, so at some point the stone's going to fall. It may take 10 seconds, it may take 30 seconds. So if the stone keeps flying, that means that the power in it is a keich of einsaf. Because nothing in existence just has the power to just continue on and on. So now, again, this is something we did learn earlier a number of times in Ayin Beis, but here he's bringing it into context of Riyah. The Su Mara Menech V'Ru'u Mi Bara Ela. So he talked about Bara Ela, which is creation. Now he's talking about continuity, unwavering continuity. So that also Nira V'Nigla Keich Ein Sof. Shari'iev Shalias Kiyumam Hatmidi Mitzad Atzmam. Because existence and everything in existence cannot have a type of consistent and unwavering kiyum, perpetuation on its own. Why? Sharim hayvim v'nifsadim. Because they're created and they are subject to nifsadim, to decay, erosion, deterioration. Like I said, everything in this physical world is not forever. Nothing has a forever power. Everything ages, everything slowly slows down. So since it's haven v'nifsadim, which means everything in existence is perishable, so even though right now it may seem very powerful, but at some point it will weaken. So when you see this consistency, you have to say it's not coming from the object itself, it must be coming from a koyach ein sof.
Why? Take for example a rock. should not exist by itself for forever. These are the seichel.
Well, the laws of nature means that the rock will at some point, deteriorate. At some point, it will fall apart on its own. It may take time because there's erosion. Everything is subject to erosion.
But sort of the opposite point as the previous point. The previous point said things continue, and this one says that.
Look, you could ask the question, scientists say that everything is eroding. It's just so slow, we can't see it. In other words, the sun is burning out, and everything in existence is eroding. And it ultimately will completely disappear at some point. Except they say in billions, trillions of years. Firstly, the Torah does not accept that. Torah says, Chazokim kiyemi baram, that the way God created existence is they made it as strong as the first day, and he maintains that type of consistency. And when it will end, after 6,000 years, Chad Charuv, we learned, that's because God wants it to end. Just like he gives it a power to remain going, he then also says the contract expires. So Chassidus definitely goes with the position that this is coming from a koyach of Ein Sof. Yeah. The difference is that Tzva Shemayim and Tzva Eretz, we learned that the celestial bodies is also Be'ish. They have that consistency. And the earthly bodies is Kayomim B'min, the species. But this is only due to the koyach Ein Sof in it. Take away the godly power, everything will ultimately erode on its own. So even if a stone stands, it's also because God's power is making it, he wants it to remain. Whereas a human being is subject to aging and death. When it comes to a stone, that's what God wants. But if something on its own does not have eternal power, because it was created and it's subject to perishability, to decay, then the only reason you see its consistency means there's a power outside of it. That's essentially the way Chassidus brings this proof. It's not from Chassidus, actually. The Meir Nevuchim and the other Sifrei Chkira talk about it. Okay.
I'd like to ask a question about that statement about Malchus coming from a Radlah, Natik, which is unique compared to the other 9. I always understand, which is a real eye-opener for me to see such a distinction of Malchus, that it was not, I haven't seen it emphasized so much in the discussion of the Sphirot, that it's really unique Sphirot to such a level. But my question is this: I always thought that Malchus, that all the Sphirot are evolved Ilav Elul from the higher one, that Malchus is created by the Malchus of Yesod descends into Malchus, and that therefore that would show some type of Ilu Alu. So unless you're saying that, or the Rebbe is saying here that Malchus, it just exists as its own, and that what comes down from Yesod is cause and effect, but the existence of Malchus has a separate shorish and is not involved. It exists independently of the Ilav Alu from the higher levels.
Correct. So let's say Malchus is the moon, and Zah, which ends with Yesod, is the sun. So on one hand, the moon reflects the light of the sun, like you just said, Ilav Alu. The moon is reflecting. But in the moon, in the Makabel, God implanted the koyach Ein Sof that precedes all the levels of the spheres. If you want more on this, go to Igeres HaKodesh, as I mentioned, Siman Chof, especially the second half. He talks about it very clearly, very specifically. In other words, even though Shemayim is higher than Eretz, but in heaven, you can't plant anything and nothing will grow. It's only Eretz, the lowest level, Malchus, that has the power to bear fruit and grow. This is what Chassidus says. So it's true that the Makabel is lower than Mashpia and Giluyim, but there's a koyach atzmi inside of Malchus.
So it exists. That existence of it came down through a different, separate, like kav. Its existence of Malchus itself, and when this is throughout
Ishtalshus, you'll find this, that even though everything comes from one level to the next, but sometimes a certain level will have a revelation from a higher state. Like, for example, the kav is the paintbrush that God uses to create everything. But when the kav, for example, creates an eagle, it's drawing from an energy that's higher than the kav. So this is not uncommon. That you could have the force that reveals doesn't necessarily mean everything that it's revealing comes from that revelation. It's carrying energies from higher levels.
So what's unique about Malchus is the koach of Ein Sof that's with the Yesh Ma'ayin, the koach of Ein Sof that exists within Mal, the dirt, the ability to be fertile, so to speak, to be.
That's one of the unique elements in Malchus.
Wow. Yeah. So Yesh Ma'ayin does not. There's no level of Yesh Ma'ayin in Chachma Bina Das, the other 9.
No, just like Chacham Bin Adas is compared to the sky, to heaven. It's Malchus, like land, earth is Malchus. The higher levels are more like spiritual levels.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
Go to Geras HaKodesh, she'll explain it there at length. Okay, good. So we continue here. So it says like this. So, and so too, just like their existence, and their existence needs a power of Ein Sof to keep them going. Also, their functionality, the fact, for example, that the sun radiates, or other parts of existence do their function, pulasam, atmidis. It cannot be the continuousness, the continuity of their function, mitzadatzma, on its own. Because every finite entity, its power and its function is also finite, is also limited. So for example, you light a candle. It'll burn a certain amount of time, then it'll burn out on its own. Because everything in existence, in addition to not being able to be, in addition to the Yesh Ma'ayin, he said, in addition to it being a force that's keeping it going, its functionality too is limited, unless there's another force that says burn on, even beyond the fuel that you have. That example. So therefore, so now 2 things. In the continuation of their existence, kiyumam, which is their very existence continues, and pulosam, their function. So nida bezeh, again, nida, you see in it, it's obvious with like nida, ria, that the koyach Ein Sof that's keeping it going. V'zehu mereiv einim v'amitz koyach ish lo neder. Again, this is something that he's actually going to seichen leman das. Mereiv einim v'amitz, from the very power of the strength, and the amitz is the amitz is the intensity, maybe.
Amitz koyach.
Yeah, the strength and the intensity of the strength of the power. Ish lo neder. Not one thing lo neder is lost, which are referring to both tzvar shamayim and tzvar aretz, like he says, the mizeh shen kayomim beish. Now you see that the celestial bodies, that every individual of those bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, etc., the planets, the kayomim beish, ubemin, meaning ubemin in the species. He doesn't really distinguish here between the heavenly and the earthly, but he says both beish ubemin, which means ishlei nedar. Ishlei nedar means not one is missing, not one is lacking, not one is weakened. So from the fact that they perpetuate individually and in the species, neither bezeh koyach Ein Sof. In this we see the power of Ein Sof. He's not adding something new. He's just bringing this in context of what he said before, not adding a new hisbanus here, but basically what he said earlier that their continuation, their permanence, indicates on koyecha ein sof. U'kamoshn is boil le'il dibra maschal leman das, like we learned earlier, like it was explained earlier, the maimer laman das was a sukkos maimer. I'm just looking at it quickly, just to refresh. Yeah, it was a whole thing there, if I recall. Let me just see. Laman das, I'll tell you what page. Oh, it's later than I thought. I thought it was earlier. I think it's the Maimer, here, this one. Oh, one second. Laman das? What's that? I thought it was just earlier in the Sukkos Maimarim. It could be much, much earlier. Yeah, he's referring to much earlier. My mistake. I thought it was just these Sukkos Maimarim because not Laman Das. Laman Das goes back in this volume to page 680. Yeah. 680. If you look at tell you exactly what page, 684. Perek Shin Lamed Gimel, chapter 333. So he says, Levadjes hinimuven came asmodas akim shebe'elam. So there he talks at length about Sumar Menechem, Mibar El Hameitze b'mispet tzvam, Merev Einim, Ba'omitz Keach, Ishle Neder. So there he discussed what we're learning now at length. At page 684. For a few pages, he talks about it pretty much at length. So he's just referring to, so we did learn this before. And uses the expression, he says, the power and the intensity of the strength. This comes from the intensity of atzmus, the sheer power, the sheer, I must look for the word tegbeidus. It's like overwhelming power. Asher dover gashmi, that a physical thing, yeh bebchinas kiyum nitzchi, should be in a state of perpetual and eternal existence. Kol zman sha'rotzen hu b'kiyumeh. As long as the rotzen, God's rotzen, maintains that he wants to have it. So this is coming from the power of Atzmus itself, that a Dover Gashmi, which on its own is perishable and subject to erosion and deterioration and decay, etc., should continue on as long as God wants to have it in existence. That's, it calls this Tigbeidus Atzmus, and that's Merev Einim v'Omitz Keach.
Where does Merev Einim v'Omitz Keach come from? Is it a quote?
I think it's a quote that continues after Sumar Menechem. That's what it looks like.
It's a pasuk.
Yeah. I think it follows Sumar Menechem.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pasuk goes like this. If you look on the page Tafresh Pei Daled, the full pasuk goes like this: Sumar Menechem, V'Re'umi Bara Ela, Hameitzi b'Mispar Tzvam, V'Reiv Einim v'Omitz Keach Ishlei Neda. So it's all a continuation of the Sumar Menechem.
Thank you.
So now
It's in Yeshayahu.
yeah. So now he concludes like this: Valkain, and therefore, Kasher Einov Reyes, when his eyes see, She'esav is called over Gashmi, who ain't safe mamish, that the creation of every physical thing is literally from Ein Sof itself. U'kamoy Kain nimtze behem keich Ein Sof. Not just that it's created from Ein Sof, Yesh Mayim, but also within it lies a keich Ein Sof. Hamakayim umasmid mitziyusam apu'ulosam, that sustains and masmid makes it continuously exist and function. Good. And afterwards, Yaimik v'yizbeinen, inyan b'chinas ein sof. And then after he sees this, we witness it with our very eyes. And then he delves deeper into it. Yamik v'yizbeinen, and contemplates. Inyan b'chinas ein sof. What is this power of ein sof that is creating and sustaining existence, every part of existence? Shekol ishtalshus eil m'shem b'chinas ein ketz u'misper. That the all ishtalshus of all the worlds, which are endless, ein ketz u'misper, and with no number, infinite. U'behem madregas al yenus v'gveis ma'od. And in those levels, when you talk about all the worlds, there's some levels that are extremely high, sublime, and elevated levels. Kulam ein arech elov klal. They all are infinitely distant to God, the Keich Ein Sof that creates and sustains them. Ad shekulim yachid shaven etzlei, to the point that all of them are equalized before Him. Imasiya agashmis, knows the highest levels of the worlds, the most spiritual worlds, are equal compared to the Eibush, to the Asiya Gashmis, to the physical world. Atzilus and Asiya, and even higher than Atzilus, are all equal. Like he says, the Ak, Adam Kadman, the Daimim Hagashmi, and the physical mineral, the Daimim, a stone, a physical Daimim. Kamay Evan V'cheres, next page, 1198, like a stone, or a shard, a cheres, how do you translate cheres? How do you translate cheres? Clay. Right. A stone
Pottery.
and clay. And clay, hakol shav in the fun of, are all equal in the face of God. Ak, the highest world, Adam Kadman, and Evan V'cheres. Okay, so we have two things going on here. First of all, we witness in existence the power of Ein Sof, first of all, the creation, and then the sustenance, and also its functionality. And then we come to contemplate on this Ein Sof. That is a contemplation. What's the contemplation? That this Ein Sof is completely, infinitely apart from everything that in existence, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, and they're all equal. The im kol zeh, and nevertheless, despite that, the chinas Ein Sof mamish mahava kol nivra ma'ayin liyesh tamid, and despite its being so distant and beyond, this Ein Sof mamish creates every creation ma'ayin liyesh, from nothing to something. Tamid, consistently, b'chol eisa, b'chol rega, every moment and every second. So now his eyes see this existence of the divine within all of existence. So even though we witness it and we see that there's a power that is giving existence, ability to exist, and sustains it, but we have no way. There's no way for us to understand the personality of this Keich Ein Sof. And even Gan Eden, going back to the point that even a higher world, like Gan Eden, not just this physical world, is only a reflection, a ray and a reflection of godliness. The Nun Alofim Yevlis. Heim Gamken Rakara, Nun Alofim Yevlis is a level which, Yevel is 50 years. Nun Alofim Yevlis means 50,000 50s. The Medrash and Chassidus brings that we're talking about very high levels of, especially in time, but this is also speaking about a level, not just time. It's called Nun Alofim Yevlis. That when Mashiach comes, we will experience the Nun Alofim Yevlis. So he says, I don't want to go into it right now in detail, but if you want more information on it, I can elaborate a little later. I just want to first just cover the subject. So even Nun Alofim Yevlis is only a reflection, no matter, though it's 50,000 times 50 years. So we're talking about here, 50 times 50,000 is what?
Two and
2.5
2,500,000.
million, right?
But there is also the concept that 7,000 years is like 1 week. And Nunalofim Yevlo is just make the calculation for that. Because 1,000 years is like 1 day, and Nunalofim Yevlo is relating to this number.
I don't think so, but I think it literally means Nun Alofim Yevlis. I'll talk about this a little later. I just want to let me finish the theme here, then we'll go back to it. But the bottom line is talking about a hamshachas and giluyim that will go and stretch for almost endlessly. Okay. There's also only a reflection. All this is part of the contemplation that is coupled with the riyah. Remember, we're seeing in existence that there must be a power that's beyond it, a koyach ein sof. We're contemplating that this koyach ein sof, even though we can't understand it, its personality, but we can contemplate on its power, and that everything is infinitely distant from it, and it's only a reflection. It says, "Ukamayim azal al posuk asher some shemes ba'aretz." Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go into this topic. Okay. So I once, this is a big topic. It's not so often that it's broad, but it looks like I'm going to have to explain it. So it says, "Asa some same shemes ba'aretz." So literally it means that he placed names in this world. So he says, no, al tikra shemes ala shamus. Shamus from the word misa, from shmama, from destruction. Shegam b'chinas v'chad charuv hu b'chinas shem v'ha'ara levad. Okay, let me explain what's he saying here. So the Gemara says like this. Shit in Gemara in Sanhedrin. Shit afishnin da'ava alma, that God designated that the world would exist for 6,000 years, 6 millennia. Then it says,
it's in Tehillim.
Yeah. But let me explain. I'll explain. So now, 6,000 years he created the world. This is its time span. Then it says v'chad charuv, and Rab Samloy, another opinion is shtei charuv. That 6,000 years will be existence. Then Mashiach will come, like Shabbos, 6,000, like 6 days of the week. The 7,000th will be chad charuv. Charuv literally means it will all be destroyed. Another opinion will be 2,000 years of charuv, of destruction. So two opinions, not relevant here so much, the two opinions. Chad charuv is the main opinion. So of course, everyone wants to understand, what is this chad charuv? What, God's going to destroy the world? So Chassidus explains, there's a whole bunch of Maimorim that explain, it means there'll be a new world order. Compared to the new world order, the old world order will be as if like kasher shamayim hachadoshim ve'eretz chadoshim, be new heavens and new earth. So charuv means that the previous state will be like shedding a layer of shedding skin in order to assume a new layer of skin. So the world will go through a fundamental transformation. So it's not, God forbid, actual destruction. It's a bittul that is like, so that's where it says that what kind of world will it be? So there are places that discuss this world. We're talking now, not the first stage of Mashiach's coming, where there, as the Rambam says, there won't necessarily have any change in nature. It will just be a world, we'll have a Beis HaMikdash, and we will have a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, and we'll bring carbonus and so on. Then there's a second stage where we talk about mitzvahs, ptelis la'aseh, that the mitzvahs will no longer be. And again, Chassidus explains what that means. In Ageres HaKedah, Simon Chavav, the Alter Rebbe discusses these two stages. It's a pretty common theme in the Rebbe's Sichos. The second stage, however, will not be the same order. It will be a new world order. And that's when we speak about Chad Charuv. And then one of the language used there is that it'll be the Gili of Nun Lofim Yevlis. Will be a new span of time, which, as we see, is much more than 6,000. It's 50 times 200. It's Nun Lofim 50,000 times 50. So Nun Lofim Yevlis 50,000. And Chassidus actually says that it's just a number to give us a sense of its expansiveness, but it's even more than 50,000. But upon him, it's essentially referring to a new level of a new state of being, of existence. So Gan Eden, we know, is higher than this world, according to the interpretation of Elam Haba's Gan Eden. It's the world that comes, the world of schar, that a neshama goes to after passing this world. So he said that's a high level, that's a reflection. But Nur Nalofim Yevlis is now talking about a whole different level. And even that is only a reflection. That's what he wants to say here. And he brings it out, because when it says, Al Shames Be'aretz, Al Tikr Shames El Shames, Shagam B'chins B'chat Cheruv is only a Shem Va'ara Levad. Because it says that God will introduce some type of churban. But the churban is also, don't call it churban. I think it actually, he means Shemis, Al Tikr Shemis El Shames. Not sure. In Tehillim, which way is it? What's the simple?
Tehillim it said shamois. Al tikri shamois elo shemois. Shem is a hole.
Yeah. So he's saying that even that state, when there'll be charuv, shamesh, shmama, it's also shem va'ara levad. So no matter how high the level is, it's still only a reflection of the divine.
It's like
Now,
you
this
said,
is-
it's not a shmamo. It's a different level.
A new state of being, a new reality. Yeah.
No.
And listen to this expression now. So the Rebbe Rashab just gave us a whole isbonenus about Koyach Ein Sof and recognizing that everything is just a reflection. So when a person comes to that type of recognition, look what he says now. The iluzes yelibe doig bekirbe. The yichla mamish. The iluzes. And due to this, his heart will be doig bekirbe, will be concerned or anxious.
Anxious.
The yichla mamish, and he'll mamish become ill. This is the Chelas Ava. Mizeh, from this, Mashakol Yemei Elam, the fact that all his entire existence, all the days of existence, lo yuchel lahasig muhusa ein sei baruch hu. So recognizing and understanding what Ein Sof is, he comes to a sense of like aching that he cannot achieve and appreciate and understand the mohus, the very personality of Ein Sof. He only can, he sees everything else as a reflection, and the Ein Sof itself eludes him. The Ein of Royes Mitziyuse Mamish. What is this next line? Itay Imoy.
He's seeing clearly. He's seeing clearly the Metzias.
Yeah, he sees clearly the Metzias Mamish. Itay Imoy. It's with him, and Itay with him. Itay is like a double language of that is with him and by him. Eich es hashamayim v'saaretz ani molei. How I, God, fill heaven and earth. Umahave. And by filling it, I create, and every physical and every spiritual entity, yesh ma'ayin, ma'ayin liyesh. L'chein einei adam lo yitiz be'eno. And that's why the sight of a person, the eyes of the person do not satisfy and fulfill him. Sheroyes mitziyusei
the colors.
l'hasim husi is baruch. Because he sees the existence of the Koyach Ein Sof, but he is expiring. He's completely overwhelmed or unable to call this. He's getares for zich. How do you say that in English? He is longing
Expires.
to comprehend the muhus of godliness, of Mahusei Baruch. So the muhus is what eludes him. He sees the mitzias, but it's the muhus that eludes him. Oh, now, I mean, when you read this, it's clearly that Rebbe Rashab is speaking about a level that he's at, and we need a little work to get to this level, to put it mildly. But basically, he's saying that when a person really appreciates that all of existence is from the Koyach Ein Sof, and then you start contemplating what is the Koyach Ein Sof, you remain tremendously hungry and thirsty and longing to what is this Koyach Ein Sof that gives everything reality, that creates everything and sustains everything.
Simon, kiloyan could be annihilation.
Annihilation, but I don't like that word because it's very negative. I'd see koles would be more like vayachulu. It's pining, it's longing, like kleis hanefesh.
Yeah.
A geht aris von sich.
Yeah.
In other words, you are longing to something that is beyond you. You see something, but you can't quite comprehend it. So therefore, your whole being is aching. That's the words I would use. Loving, and the ache of love, like we said, seeing something.
The modern Hebrew is craving.
Okay.
It's more
That's
than
a good,
craving.
that's
no.
that word is also fine.
It's more than craving. It's deeper.
In the
Okay.
Teichacha, it uses that lashon for hoping for something that never comes.
Okay, but here he's not saying that it never comes. He's just saying it eludes us. It remains beyond us.
The Rebbe Rashab said,
Well, essentially, that's what it.
V'yechel mamish. He's going to be really sick.
Yeah. Look, the closest thing we can relate to, as we spoke yesterday, is the things that when we gaze at something and it causes us to ache for it, to the point of chelasava, that a person gets completely consumed and frustrated. And I don't say the word frustrated, but consumed, and knowing that you can only see it, but you can't touch it, you can't contain it. So this he's applying now to Lakus. That it's hard for us to relate to, because if it comes to Lakus, we don't feel that compelling sense of urgency. But for the muscle, for us to relate to this, you need to find something that literally consumes you, that you see something, you see its value, but you can't fully grasp or contain it because it remains beyond you.
You don't
That's
find
what he's
a
saying,
place,
that
you
Riyah,
don't find a place for yourself.
that's why Riyah ultimately creates this deep longing. I mean, listen, the English language is not really adequate completely when you talk about these levels. So I think the words we've used, longing, craving, you just brought up, is good. Pining, lusting even. I mean, all these words are different expressions. Remember, he said, Hishtekegus, and he said, Ta'av, and he said, Semayan, and he said, Kaloyas, Kalois. A lot of words here. So if you really want to have a precise definitions, I'd have to work on that to see what level each level is. But I think that it's clear, the message is clear here. Just a question of the intensity of it.
I have a question
about himself.
One second.
Desiring yourself out of existence.
Okay, look, these are words, the semantic. I mean, any word that works, that captures this theme is great. I don't think there's going to be a black and white definitive word that's going to capture it all. There's a lot of aspects to this. And you see, he keeps on using different words as he goes through it.
I have a metaphysics question, if I can ask.
The chelas, one second. The chelas ava, remember, is definitely the operative word, because that's the pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Chelas ava ani, that I love sick, that I'm sick with love, that I'm completely consumed like a sick person. In the Maimarim Surmarim Enechem that I mentioned from the Alter Rebbe and others, they actually talk that you're so sick with it that you can't eat and you can't drink, and anything that you actually eat will throw up. In other words, you're really sick with this type of love. There's that level of love sickness.
Nafshi choilas avosecho, in Yedid Nefesh.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
The question, it's just that some of the verbiage we used in describing the nature of creation, of the creation and the perpetuation of it, and we talked about. So this is a digression, but we talked about the koach ha'ein sof and the power of the ein sof, and previously, somewhat we talked about. I don't know if it's related or not, but we talked about sort of this being a potentiality, if you will, a koach hagvul. Sorry, I think it was a koach the Eish Levana, the Equalized. we just talked about this prior to this section, and I'm wondering if it's related. And the question is, we say koach ein sof. You're saying these creations and this perpetuation of things that are created derive from the koach ein sof. It seems like they would derive from the Ein Sof itself. The koach ein sof is the potential for Ein Sof to come into this world, into creating reality. And I guess I'm confused why he's using the words koach ein sof instead of just Ein Sof or ora bligvul or something that is more mamashi rather than just potential. When you're talking about things that actually exist, they derive from something that's potential. They simply would derive from something that is actually in force, and that's the whole point, active perpetually. So maybe it's semantics, but yeah.
Well, Chassidus uses the word koach ein sof. It's not referring to koach as potential. Koach ein sof, koach can be used in Hebrew in several ways. You could say koach v'lei poel, koach and poel, potential and actual. You could say koach as a faculty. But koach ein sof could also be the power of Ein Sof, which is not power as a potential, power as active power. So Chassidus uses koach ein sof in that context. Don't confuse it with what we learned before about koach and yechelis as potential. It simply means that we see the power of Ein Sof in just like you see when a person avne de mizgeshes buff, a person throws a stone, you can see how strong he is by how far the stone will go. So the strength, that's what he's talking is the power of Ein Sof invested in creation here. It's not relation to what we learned earlier. The only connection to bli gvul and gvul would be the eish shcheira, isha, eish hey is pining and longing for eish yud, the eish levana. That was the malchus yearning to connect to sevav and beyond. Now we're of course talking about an aveda that we are longing, and he's going to bring it back to the gvul and bli gvul, but not regarding koach ein sof. Here is talking about what I just said. Yeah,
just in pashtus. I got it.
Okay.
Rabbi Jacobson, the Rebbe says there in a line, he says, is that called davar gashmi v'ruchni me'ayin liyesh. I thought we were making earlier, the Rebbe made a distinction between Malchus and the other Sphira, but only yesh me'ayin is in Malchus, not in the other spheres, not in the other areas of.
Where do you see spheres here? He's not mentioning any spheres here. He's saying everything in existence, physical and spiritual, is yesh ma'ayin. Where do you see spheres here?
But didn't we learn that yesh ma'ayin is really a unique attribute of Malchus rather than
God effectuates yesh koach of yesh ma'ayin through Malchus, but everything, Malchus included, everything is yesh ma'ayin from God. Ruchni and Gashmi, everything in the spiritual and material world is created by God.
Yeah, but I thought don't we use the term yesh ma'ayin only really applies to Gashmius, the physical humrius of the world, is yesh ma'ayin, whereas everything else is el ba'alu?
No. Atzilus is yesh ma'ayin, Ak is yesh ma'ayin, the Kav is yesh ma'ayin. Everything is yesh ma'ayin when you really talk about it compared to Atzmus. It's just that different things have different levels, a different discussion, have nothing to do with Malchus. Beginning of Ayin Beis, he talks about are things Gilead Helem or the Yesh Ma'ayin. There are elements in Oyer that reveal the concealed. But when you talk really compared to Atzmus, everything is Yesh Ma'ayin. Because Atzmus is beyond everything. So everything needed to be chosen and willed by God. And that in effect makes it Ein Arech. Here he's focusing on how everything, even Oyer, he doesn't say the word Oyer here, but even the highest levels of Oyer and Sof are ultimately as distant from Atzmus as the physical world.
So I guess so when you're talking in Chassidus about relative perspectives, then that you could discuss that certain things are yesh ma'ayin and certain things are not. But in regard to Atzmus, if you're talking about the highest level, then everything's yesh ma'ayin. Is that what you're trying to say there?
Yeah, but even more than that. The point here is that nothing could exist without God. Let's speak like simple. Ruchnius doesn't have any power of its own. It's also created by God.
But don't we make
There's only one God?
But don't we make a distinction between yesh ma'ayin and ilu v'elu in Chassidus?
Not in this context. God created everything. You're talking about how he created it. He created things in different manners, but everything was created by God. Nothing has any independent power.
Yeah, that's obvious, but I thought there was distinctions between Ilu Elul and Yesh
But that's
Mayim.
not relevant here. Here, he wants to point out that compared to the Koyach Ein Sof, which God creates everything, everything is just a reflection.
Is it a reflection or Yesh Mayim? Everything is Yesh Mayim in regard to the relation.
Both are correct.
Okay.
A reflection is also infinitely distant from the thing it reflects. Okay? Okay, let's see here. I think we should just stop here by the end of this paragraph. Okay, so essentially, when you really immerse yourself and contemplate on this, you come to realize how everything is equal before him, and you realize that there's Ein Sof, but you cannot grasp what it is. So that creates a tremendous longing and a tremendous ache, tremendous illness even, of being able to see something that is so infinitely powerful, but not being able to understand its personality. And that creates this tzemoyin, this chelas ava that he's describing. Okay.
But doesn't this cholas ava come from trying to understand this, like we've been trying to understand this level, rather than actual just seeing? I thought the point was when you see something you long for, the eyes. When our eyes actually see the world, and without this deep understanding of Chassidus, we see deterioration. We see death, we just see deterioration. We don't see that element of constant to meet us in our day-to-day life. So our eyes belie the fact, so to speak, about the underlying truth. So it seems to me that this pining that we have for Ein Sof comes really more from understanding than from our eyes.
No,
So
that's not what he's saying here. He's saying, Su'u morem einechem. What you're speaking about is what you see without looking properly. He says, you raise your eyes to heaven and look who created all of this. See that you see the koyach of Ein Sof in the fact that, first of all, yesh mayim. Secondly, in the consistency. That's what he said here. But seeing, as we learned, the pasuk says, seeing does not sate, does not fulfill someone. When you see something you love, on the contrary, it makes you want even more of it. That's what he's discussing here. That when you look at existence with healthy eyes, and then you see the power that that creates it and sustains it, that creates a longing for this Ein Sof when you contemplate on what it is, and then you remain frustrated because you can't contain it. That's what he's
Rabbi,
saying.
I have a question, and I don't know where I learned this. I think I learned it. I don't know if it's like Rambam or it's Chassidus, but there's somewhere it says like look at the heavens or look at the creation, and in order to develop yira. And in Mamish, if you think about this, think of all these things we just talked about.
That's the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Deis says that.
Yeah. So therefore, when you think about that, and it's essentially saying the same thing, it seems to me, and that does evoke a sense of awe. When I think about the things he just described here, all these mushals, then it does create a sense of awe. Awe, though, sort of puts a little bit of distance between the observer and that which is being observed, or that which creates the observed. God, in this case, creating the creation.
That's why you have to stick to what it says here. Here is not talking about awe. He's not talking about Ava and Yira. He's talking about Chelas Ava.
Why? It's the opposite, though.
It's two separate things. I mean, a lot of different contemplations lead you to different experiences. Here, he wants to focus on the experience of feeling completely aching with love for something that remains unquenchable.
Right.
That's not what the Rambam is talking about. The Rambam is talking about how do you come to love and have awe for God is by contemplating on his creation. So it's critical not to mix things because it's two different discussions. He's not bringing the Rambam.
I'm not trying to mix them, chas v'shalom. I understand. It's a total different. He's trying to make a different point. I get it. But what I'm saying is, if you look into turn your eyes and look above, and I think about these things do instill awe in me. In other words, like let's lahabdil.
But he's not discussing awe. He's discussing here chelas ava.
I understand, and I'm trying to understand how you access that emotion, because to me, when I think about these things, speaking at a human level, it inspires awe, because lahabdil. If you think about, we talked about, say, a beautiful woman, your wife.
The Rebbe Rashab is introducing more than awe. He's introducing that when you really contemplate on Ein Sof, he's going to create an unquenchable thirst. That's what he's discussing here. So it goes beyond awe. It goes deeper than that. Awe is one level. This doesn't negate the awe that people have from thinking about God. Here he's going deeper. He wants to talk about the unquenchable element that results from this contemplation.
Okay, I'm with you. I get it. But what I'm trying to say is, when I have an unquenchable lust or passion, desire for something lahabdil in this world, like looking at a picture of my wife, or being separate from my beloved, and I can't have my beloved at the moment. Well, but ultimately I could have my beloved. So in other words, when you have a thirsty and quench or desire, and to some extent you have the at least in your mind, you have the belief you can have that at some point, somehow, or that you've had a taste.
He says
of
no.
It,
when it comes to Riyah, no. When it comes to contemplation, yeah. But when it comes to seeing, when you come to the level of Riyah, right now, so far, he's only talking about the unquenchable. He didn't talk about how to quench it yet. So right now, Riyah, as opposed to contemplation, creates the loitas be'ena. That's what he says. The loitas be'ena. That does not fill you. On the contrary, the more you see it, the more you contemplate, the more you remain aching for it.
So here's the ultimate question: is that level of connection with the Eibishter, are we going to get? I'm not saying are we going to get to this, but is the Rabbi Rashab going to say that yes, you can in some ways connect with that level of godliness?
I would wait and see.
Okay, because what I'm saying is, in order to have a thirsting quench, a craving for something, it seems like it's something which humans should be able to attain at somehow, some way.
Well, we're middle of a mimer. We're middle of a discussion. He didn't finish yet, so I would wait and see where he's going to go with this.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for going through those series of questions.
Rabbi Jacobson, is it inherent that Riyah produces Ahava?
What did Riyah? What did you say?
The experience of Riyah, what we're talking about now, is it inherent that it produces Ahava, or does Riyah also?
What's Achva?
Ahava, love, or is it inherent? Or is it also?
You mean the chelas ava he's talking about?
Yeah, or does Riyah also produce Yira? And if so, how do you differentiate?
Honestly, right now he's speaking about how Riyah creates a chelas ava, an aching love, and I would wait till we finish the whole subject. And I don't know if you're going to. We have to reconcile all the different Maimorim and all the different places that talk about what Riyah accomplishes. You know, right now he's talking about this aspect. So I would stick to that. The only thing you can bring up is the parentheses. He said that La'osid Lavi will have a Riyah and it'll be a Shuv. So there will be the element with the fire, the wall of fire that we learned on page 1197. B'derech Pella. They'll have Riyas Mohus and it'll be in a state of Shuv. So right now we're talking today, in our matzav today, we only have the Riyas HaMetzias, and we don't have the Hasagas HaMahus, which is why it creates this this element of longing. That's what the Rebbe Rashab is saying here.
Okay, you said you were going to tell two stories today. You wanted to do, I was recorded, about the, you wanted to repeat the story about the Isha, and the one about the woman. You said you wanted to repeat these stories, and while they're recordable. Just want to remind you, if you still have time.
You're talking about the Torah Shalom? What are you referring
That'd be
to?
very nice. You didn't put that online, so I haven't
Yeah.
seen yet. You didn't put that link online
No, I
yet. so
didn't. I
don't know,
didn't
but
post
I
it
don't
yet.
know
You're
if
right.
that's
I'll
the Torah
post
Shalom.
it. I'll post it. But I'm not sure. What are you asking now?
The other story, Rabbi Jacobson, was the one about that I brought up about the woman that came to you after your discussion and said about.
Okay, so we
she was
ran out of time today. I'll have to do it then.
Okay.